This issue and the Democrats failing to even evince a scintilla of curiosity about it,
yes,
it's all because they're just trying to continue the collusion conspiracy by another name. That's why they were freaking out about Bill Barr. That's why they don't want to acknowledge the impending IG report from the Department of Justice. They're in this wormhole that they've been psychologically and professionally invested in for years, and they can't extricate themselves from it, and it's really sad and pathetic to watch.
And it's hurting so many institutions that we're going to need when the Trump era is over, I would argue. Michael Tracy, thank you for that perspective. So this era will end at a certain point. The FBI will still exist. At that point, it'll be clear what kind of damage Jim Comey's conduct has done to that institution. We'd like to get some sense of it now. We're joined by former FBI Deputy Assistant Director Danny Coulson. Mr. Coulson, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
As someone who devoted a lot of his life to the FBI, how do you feel watching the former director behave like that on television?
It's absolutely disgusting. I was only there for 31 years, so I have some sense of the FBI and currently. To see him say this is normal, this is not normal. There are certain guidelines and principles that we follow. You have to have a preliminary investigation and then a full investigation. But the real problem here, Tucker, is that this case didn't start with an FBI field office. It started basically on the 7th floor of the FBI. And when it's done by a field office like Iran-Contra or like Watergate, you have checks and balances at the very bottom level. And these cases will never get to headquarters. A good commander, and I was a commander for a long time, and this came across my desk, especially a FISA application, I would have done that about 5 minutes. We're not approving this. It's unverified. It's salacious. And I think the question is here, if it was, and Comey knew it was, why would we have the audacity to walk that to the FISA court and give it as something that we would be the basis for taking over a Fourth Amendment issue and getting a search warrant? So it's not common. It's aggravating to those of us who are there. I still do a lot of work for the FBI. They're all thinking, where did these guys go to our academy? Don't you know the rules here? And clearly they did and ignored them. And I think that's what really upsets us all.
Well, yeah, I mean, what a tragedy for people who are serving the FBI, the special agents serving there right now, who are watching their integrity impugned by this lunatic.
Absolutely, and I think, remember this, we take a lot of pride in credibility.
Yes.
People talk to us because of our credibility and our ability to follow the law and to follow the Constitution, and these guys just jumped right over it. And it's maybe this is too strong, but I want to say it. It's disgusting to see what the director of the FBI now says. Also, this is troubling, that the head lawyer for the FBI finds no problem with what happened even now. In retrospect, he doesn't have a problem with it. So I think that tells the mentality of the people under James Comey's watch on the 7th floor.
It's distressing. I agree completely. Mr. Coulson, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Tucker. It's always a pleasure.
A pro-life campus activist assaulted on video by the left for her views. That's next. After the break.
Minnesota, and I back them with my 60-day money-back guarantee. MyPillow has a 10-year warranty, and it's machine washable and dryable. Sleep is one of the most important things to your health, and MyPillow is one of the most important things to your sleep.
Call or go to mypillow.com. Use the promo code and save over 50% with Mike's 4-pack.
Life activist Carly Shimkus is a reporter with Fox News Headlines 24/7, and she joins us tonight. Carly?
Hey, Tucker, how are you? The debate over a woman's right to choose versus her baby's right to live has always been controversial, but now it's grown violent. A string of attacks on pro-life activists.
Don't do that, please. Please.
Terrible person!
Please.
You're a terrible person!
You just call the
This is
cops.
not okay!
Can you call the cops?
This is not okay!
Man, calm down.
This is not okay! Shut the up right now! This is wrong!
Hi, I'm at the
This is
pit. There's a
triggering.
woman that just punched my friend 4 or 5 times. She assaulted
You're
him.
not an innocent human being. You're a terrible person!
There is Pennsylvania State Representative Brian Sims, who heckled an elderly woman outside a Philadelphia Planned Parenthood. The incident was caught on camera, but this time by Sims himself, who proudly posted it to social media. In a previous encounter, Sims recorded himself harassing a mother and her teenage daughters, and even offered his social media viewers $100 to identify them. But that situation backfiring as a group of 1,000 pro-life supporters gathered outside Sims' local Planned Parenthood today. Meantime, rhetoric among pro-choice lawmakers has become increasingly extreme. Alabama State Representative John Rogers created waves this week by saying, quote, "Some kids are unwanted, so you kill them now or kill them later." Tucker?
Carly, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Well, as you just heard, hateful attacks in the pro-life movement are now normal. You just heard about what happened in downtown Philadelphia with Pennsylvania Representative Brian Sims. Here's part of it.
Hi, everyone. Representative Brian Sims here, and I am outside the Planned Parenthood. A bunch of pseudo-Christian protesters who have been out here shaming young girls for being here. And so here's the deal. I've got $100 to anybody who will identify any of these three.
So we're
I'm going to
actually
donate to
just
Planned
praying for
Parenthood.
the babies.
I'm going to donate to Planned Parenthood. So
we
look,
believe that
a
women
bunch of
deserve
white
more.
people standing up in front of a Planned Parenthood,
deserve
shaming
more.
people.
I'm really
There's nothing
sorry.
Christian about what you're doing.
Well, today, pro-life activists held a large-scale rally outside that same Planned Parenthood in Philadelphia in response to Sims's behavior. Abby Johnson is a former Planned Parenthood clinic director, now a pro-life activist. Her story was told in the recent film Unplanned. Abby Johnson joins us. Abby, thanks very much for coming on. So is it
Of course.
our imagination, or is the reaction to anti-abortion activism, including prayer, turning violent?
It is. It's becoming increasingly violent, and I think one of the reasons is because people in their own party, the Democratic Party, are not willing to come out and talk about this behavior, condemn this behavior. Nobody from the National Organization for Women, who are supposed to stand up for women, nobody's coming out and condemning this behavior. And so it just sort of goes unchecked, and it goes unnoticed and without consequences. And you know, I'm here to say, along with 1,000 other pro-lifers who are there today, to say this is enough. We've had enough. We're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be harassed. We're out there. This is within our First Amendment right to do so.
What do you think is what do you think is driving this? These are people who are arguing for abortion, in some cases post-viability, late-term abortion. Not only they're not ashamed of that position, but they want to hurt anyone who disagrees. Why do you think? Where does that come from? That impulse?
Well, so I think it's a couple things. I think right now, abortion supporters they're feeling the heat, they're feeling the pressure. We've got these heartbeat bills being signed all across the country. We have pro-life measures taking place in many, many different states. I think that now we have a Supreme Court that's being set up to overturn Roe v. Wade. So I think in some ways it's a response to the sort of impending doom that they feel that Roe might one day actually be overturned. But I think also, you know, we've got over 60 million abortions on the books recorded since Roe was passed in 1973. And, you know, we're dealing with a group of people who are very wounded. They're very hurt, and they need to really justify their own actions. And a lot of times that hurt comes across as anger, and they just don't see the difference.
I think that's exactly right. When you know you're wrong, that's when you're the maddest. That's how I am. I think that's how most people are. It's sad. Abby, thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
Well, the left has suddenly decided that people's tax returns, which were private, are now fair game for politics. So what other private information ought to be available to everyone? Why not your medical records? We'll ask a lawmaker from New York State that question after the break. It's been an exciting week for CNN. Russian collusion is still a lie. They spent 2 years telling the country, but they finally got someone to leak information on Donald Trump's taxes from 30 years ago. That information showed that Trump lost money. People in the network are excited about this.
This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Are you listening? The President of the United States is a fraud and a con man.
You were saying he's a sociopath.
Without any question.
A con? All of it?
All of it was a con. You know, this person is a walking fraud.
He calls people losers, and he has such disdain, and yet he was literally the biggest loser in the country.
So if you remember the 90s, you might recall that Trump's business problems were a big news story. They were real. Trump wrote a book about them. But don't tell Don Lemon. He was shocked.
You know what they say about gambling, casino gambling, right? The house always wins? Well, not always. Not if it's a Trump casino. Come on. Who loses money at a casino except for the person gambling, not the owner? Because I'm good enough, smart enough, and doggone, people love me.
What are the odds that Don Lemon says that in the mirror every morning? Hi. Joe Concha writes about media for The Hill, and he joins us tonight. Joe, great to see you tonight. So they basically discovered that Trump lost a ton of money in the 90s, which anyone who was alive then knew because it was a major story, but this was news because why?
Why? Because it was presented as recycled news. I don't like to use the term fake news, Tucker, but in this case, you could have read Donald Trump's book from 2007, The Art of the Comeback. You could have read any of the New York tabloids, the New York Daily News, New York Post talked about the Trump slump for those years between 1985, 1994. You could have watched The Apprentice, Season 1, Episode 1, the very first segment. Donald Trump literally says on video that he lost billions of dollars, he was billions in debt, and he was able to come back. So to keep all of that out of reporting, if we want to call this even reporting, that is the bias of omission. We've talked about that before, and that is the worst kind of bias, because if you were, say, younger, or you didn't follow Donald Trump, or you live out of the bubble and you're taking care of your kids every day and you're working hard and you come home and you hear this story about Trump losing billions back at that time, and you don't get the other side of the story, which is he was very transparent about it on TV, on books. You're being sold a bill of goods here that this was a new revelation when it was anything but new, Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, this was his whole story, right? I mean, he bragged about it endlessly. Once was lost, now I'm found. This was his redemption story. Did you hear anybody covering this pause for a moment to say, a little weird that we're looking at private financial information that's supposed to be proprietary? I mean, no one is supposed to have this information. Did anyone say that? Kind of a violation of privacy, no?
No. Tucker, no one does, because it's a means to an end, right? I remember I was on your show and we talked about the Access Hollywood tape, and everybody concentrated, and rightly so, the contents of it. But then there was another part of that story, which is how exactly did that tape get out of NBC and into the hands of the Washington Post 2 days before a presidential debate, a major one, 3 weeks before an election? No one bothered to look into that, and no one's going to bother to look into the fact that this was leaked by somebody, confidential information, and it got into the hands of the New York Times and obviously was spread everywhere. And by the way, and I get that Don Lemon, he's on at night and there are a lot of opinions at night, but he's still billed as an anchor. And for him to talk that way and act that way, and I've been on Don's show and he's a great guy in person, but I can never picture Brett Baer or Chris Wallace or Jeff Glor or David Muir ever acting like that, and they're anchors also. So you wonder why CNN struggles, and you want to hear about struggles, Tucker. So in cable news, they rank, obviously, all the shows by ratings. And you got to get down to number 36 out of Fox and MSNBC and CNN. Number 36 to find the highest rated CNN show. In other words, the other 35 are the other two networks. So they have to understand they're alienating their viewers by acting like children on the air, but they're not doing it. I don't understand why when the results are so horrible from a business perspective.
Because it's a political mission. I think that's it. Joe Concha, great to see you tonight. Thank you for that.
Happy Mother's Day. Happy weekend.
Happy weekend. Well, New York State Senate has approved a bill that, if it becomes law, would make it easier for Congress to request and then publish the president's state tax returns. So while we're going full authoritarian, what else should be fair game? Andrew Cuomo's text messages, his internet search history, his porn habits, why not? To help figure that out, we're joined now by New York Democratic State Senator Brian Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin, thanks very much for coming on.
Anytime, Tucker.
So it's a sincere question. You want to see Trump's tax returns? Whatever. If they come out, I'll read them. That's fine. But it's bigger than just Trump, right? I mean,
yeah, of course. I mean, the bill.
Don't we have? Is there anything that should be private?
Well, first of all, as you know, on the federal level since 1924, the Ways and Means Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, the Joint Committee on Taxation, they can request anyone's federal returns. All we're saying is, if they want state returns, you were able to let you have that in New York. So
where are
regardless
yours?
whether it's Trump, well, listen, if if either the Senate Finance Chair or the Ways and Means Chair or the Joint Committee on Taxation Chair wants my line, they can request it, and it will.
No, but why don't you just release them? Well, but hold on, wait. Why don't you just release?
Why doesn't Trump just release his? I mean,
I don't know. He doesn't want to. I mean, I'd like to see him. I agree, but you're trying.
I'm not the president of the United States, Tucker.
You're forcing it. Okay.
We're not forcing anything. We're saying if there's a specified and legitimate legislative purpose that the Congress presents to the state.
Legislative. I mean, that's just look. This is total
war. There are investigations that are going on. You know, all the indictments are going on. Tucker, come on.
This is total war. They want to destroy a guy politically. That's fine. You don't like Trump.
Apply to both sides.
Whatever it takes.
Tucker, will apply to both sides. It will apply to Democrats or Republicans. The Senate Chair of Finance can request. Tucker.
Well, then how about medical records?
But that's not what this bill is about. Right now,
I know that's not what the bill's about. I'm talking about the principle. Hold on, wait. Why is it different